Manipulating time. We talked about this briefly in the film theory section, but we're going to get more in depth now. A really powerful tool that the editor has at their disposal is to assemble shots in such a way where we can pass the in-film time extremely quickly or extremely slowly. I've used this terminology a few times and I want to more directly address it. There is a reality that the characters are experiencing. This is film time. We're in a scene, and this conversation between these two characters takes about 5 minutes of real film time. That does not necessarily equate to the audience's experience, because these two characters will have a 5-minute conversation, and then it is implied that they will experience a normal 12 hours of real-time experience in the real world before whatever happens next in the movie happens. In film, there is an implied passage of time. For our audience, they see a 5-minute conversation, and then we immediately cut to 12 hours later, the characters are somewhere else entirely, and we have to pick up from context clues at the beginning of the conversation in this new scene, how they got here. We didn't actually sit in the theater for 12 hours and watch them have that 5-minute conversation and then go walk their dog at the park and do the dishes and eat lunch and dinner and shower and get ready and then go out to the club, and now we're in the club. Instead, we saw a 5-minute conversation and then we instantaneously cut to 12 hours later. So in film, it's implied that our characters are experiencing real time the way that we do. But the idea of film is the camera is a little window into their world, and we get bits of time. We get the events related to each other that tell a story, not everything that this character has ever theoretically experienced. So we can make time way shorter than it actually is, like a training montage. It's implied that our character is training for days, weeks, months, or years, and we skip through it in less than 10 seconds with a quick training montage. The opposite is also true. Maybe the characters experience something that only takes a few seconds, but we make that time take way longer by everything that we include. An anime monologue where the world freezes and the character talks to themselves for a long time in order to clearly explain their emotions and the stakes involved. But this happens other places too. So the passage of time and your ability to control time is something to be aware of and use to your advantage. Obviously, some of this is baked into filmmaking from the very beginning. The script may have specifically mentioned a time lapse that moves us from day to nighttime in order to continue the story forward. That's a written-in example of time compression. But there are smaller, subtler ways of doing this when you're considering the pacing of your story as well. There have been many times where I needed a character to take longer to do something than they actually took. And so what I did is I used multiple angles, and I actually repeated their action, but I cropped it out of the frame so that the audience couldn't tell as well. So a good example of this is we just had two characters fighting and yelling at each other. One character leaves, slams the door. Now we want to sit in the sadness with this character, but perhaps the director cut them off too early. And in the context of the edit, we need the crying to take longer than the director allowed for. Well, in this case, I would use multiple angles, and I would actually repeat a bit of the crying. And I would probably also repeat some audio or pull crying audio from another take and cover it up with some insert shots of the room. I'm using the footage that was shot in ways that it was not intended to be used in order to extend the length of time in order to help my pacing feel better. I felt very strongly that this character needs to be crying for longer than the director did while they were on set. So I'm going to use audio, covering up that audio with inserts from around the room, and I'm going to repeat takes, and I'm going to use multiple angles in an attempt to basically elongate that time, spend more time with the character than we could have otherwise, in order to allow the scene to settle and that emotion to dissipate before we move on to somewhere else.